tournament officials stared across rows of vacant seats in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the dramatic contrast from just a day earlier. The Berlin Open Final, an event designed to showcase the finest talent in women's tennis, was unfolding before a crowd far smaller than anyone had expected. The explanation could be traced back to one player. A 21-year-old Filipino wildcard had become the story of the tournament, captivating audiences around the world before her remarkable run ended in the semi-finals. In the wake of her elimination, many of the passionate supporters who had helped create the tournament's electric atmosphere were no longer present. Organizers found themselves facing an unexpected reality, while the broader tennis world began to appreciate the extraordinary influence of a rapidly growing fan base. On June 14, 2026, at Berlin's Steffi Graf Stadium, Alex Eala arrived with modest expectations. Ranked number 35 in the world and entering as a wildcard, she was viewed by many as an outsider unlikely to make a deep run. Instead, she transformed the tournament into a career-defining breakthrough. Her campaign began with a hard-fought victory over former Wimbledon semi-finalist Donna Vekic. Under pressure in the closing stages, Eala showed resilience and composure, fighting through a difficult final game to secure the win. It was the type of performance that hinted at greater possibilities ahead, even if few were paying close attention at the time. Everything changed in the round of 16. Standing across the net was world number 2 Elena Rybakina, a Wimbledon champion and one of the most accomplished grasscourt players in the game. On paper, this appeared to be the moment Eala's journey would end. Instead, it became the match that changed the entire tournament. Playing with fearless confidence, she matched Rybakina shot for shot before taking control of the contest with remarkable composure. When the final point was played, the scoreboard read 7-5, 6-4. The result immediately sent shockwaves throughout the tennis world. News of the upset spread rapidly across social media as fans reacted with excitement and disbelief. Supporters from across Europe began changing travel plans, while others rushed to secure tickets in hopes of witnessing history unfold. What had started as an underdog story was quickly becoming something much larger. For many Filipino fans around the world, Eala's victory represented more than a single match. It symbolized a breakthrough moment for an entire generation. One supporter summed up the mood perfectly, writing, "She just beat the world number 2 on grass. This is really happening." In that moment, it became clear that Alex Eala was no longer simply competing in the Berlin Open. She had become the tournament's biggest story, and the attention surrounding her was only beginning to grow. It wasn't just a personal breakthrough, it became a defining moment for Southeast Asian tennis, as Alex Eala made history by becoming the first player from the region to reach a WTA 500 semi-final on grass, immediately forcing the tennis world to take notice. In the quarterfinals, there was no easing of pressure for her opponents as Eala faced world number 8 Elena Svitolina, a proven grasscourt competitor built for high-stakes moments. Yet the result followed a familiar pattern. With composure and clarity beyond her years, Eala delivered a commanding 6-3, 6-4 victory to secure her place in the semi-finals and guarantee a breakthrough into the world's top 30. "I don't think there's any more pressure on me than there is on her," she said with calm confidence, reflecting a player fully comfortable on tennis's biggest stages. As her run continued, the stadium atmosphere transformed dramatically. Attendance grew with every round, the energy intensified, and the sense of anticipation around her presence became impossible to ignore. Filipino supporters, once scattered across the stands, now formed a unified and unmistakable force. Flags filled the arena, national colors dominated the crowd, and chants of "Laban Alex" echoed relentlessly until voices gave out. Tournament organizers took immediate notice, but even they could not anticipate what was about to unfold. When ticket data for the semi-finals was reviewed, the numbers simply did not make sense. Demand had surged beyond capacity, with more tickets requested than the stadium could physically accommodate. The driving force behind it all was clear: Alex Eala. The Filipino diaspora had mobilized on a global scale, with fans traveling in from London, Paris, Rome, Madrid, and beyond, taking time off work, spending heavily, and crossing continents just to witness a 21-year-old wildcard's extraordinary rise on grass. Faced with unprecedented demand, organizers scrambled to respond, reopening long-closed sections of the venue and deploying additional security to manage the swelling crowds. In a hastily arranged briefing, a tournament spokesperson admitted the scale of the situation was unlike anything they had ever experienced, acknowledging that ticket demand had exceeded all expectations and that every effort was being made to accommodate spectators. Yet behind the logistical scramble, a deeper realization began to settle within the tennis establishment. What they had underestimated was not just a player, but an entire global fan base that moved as one. The Filipino diaspora had demonstrated a level of collective influence that extended far beyond atmosphere. It was beginning to reshape attention, demand, and even the economics of the sport itself. They had underestimated Alex Eala, and in doing so, they were about to learn a lesson that major tournaments like the Australian Open had already begun to recognize months earlier. When a Filipino star captures momentum, the scale of support is not just noticeable, it becomes transformative. That reality became unmistakable outside Berlin's Steffi Graf Stadium, where long queues stretched far beyond the entrances. Fans traveled from across continents, including as far as Australia, waiting for hours in the hope of witnessing history firsthand. They arrived carrying flags, wearing national colors, and filling the air with chants of "Laban Alex," a sound that continued until exhaustion took over. Among the crowd was a nurse from London who had taken several days off work and flown to Germany specifically for the chance to see Eala compete live. Speaking emotionally, she shared that she had followed Eala since her teenage years and never imagined witnessing her journey in person, describing the experience as deeply meaningful. International media quickly took notice. German newspapers highlighted the unprecedented surge of Filipino supporters, while broadcasters dispatched crews to capture the scenes unfolding outside the stadium. Even the WTA, initially uncertain about the sudden rise in attention, was compelled to acknowledge the scale of what was happening. Yet as quickly as the momentum had built, it began to shift. What was anticipated as a defining moment in Eala's breakthrough run turned into a difficult semifinal challenge. Standing across the net was Linda Noskova, the 20-year-old Czech rising talent who had previously delivered a dominant victory over Eala earlier in the season at Indian Wells. Once again, Noskova proved to be a formidable matchup. With a powerful serve that produced 9 aces and aggressive baseline play that dictated rallies from the outset, she controlled the tempo of the match and consistently forced Eala into defensive positions. Eala, visibly affected by physical discomfort in her shoulder and elbow, struggled to establish rhythm on return, allowing Noskova to maintain constant pressure and close points with authority, finishing with 33 winners in a commanding display. What began as a story of historic anticipation gradually transformed into a sobering conclusion under the lights of Berlin. After just 69 minutes, the scoreboard confirmed the result, 6-2, 6-4. The dream run that had captivated thousands had come to an end. Eala left the court at Steffi Graf Stadium with her head held high, though the emotion of the moment was clearly visible. At 21 years old, she had already achieved milestones that no Filipino tennis player before her had reached, defeating a world number 2, overcoming a world number 8, reaching her first WTA 500 semifinal, breaking into the world's top 30, and earning $99,565 in prize money. While the title remained out of reach, her impact on the tournament and the wider tennis landscape was undeniable. The trophy was not hers, and the final would proceed without her. In the stands, there was no outrage, no disruption, only a quiet, emotional acknowledgement of what had just ended. Fans rose to their feet, many visibly moved, and offered a long, respectful applause. Then, in an unusual and almost surreal shift, they began to leave. Not in frustration, and not in protest, but in silence. One by one, thousands of Filipino supporters slowly exited the stadium. They had traveled from London, Paris, Rome, Madrid, and even Australia, investing time, money, and effort that for many felt like a once-in-a-lifetime journey. They had filled the arena with flags, national colors, and relentless chants of "Laban Alex," turning every appearance into a moment of collective energy. Now, with her run concluded, the experience for many felt complete. The final no longer held the same emotional pull. The following day, tournament officials were confronted with a scene that was difficult to comprehend. The Berlin Open final, an event designed to represent the peak of elite women's tennis, was played in an atmosphere that felt unusually subdued. Jessica Pegula and Linda Noskova competed for the title in front of a crowd that was only a fraction of what had filled the stadium during Eala's matches. The contrast was stark. The same venue that had roared with intensity just days earlier now echoed with relative quiet, its energy significantly diminished. For organizers and the broader tennis community, the change was impossible to ignore. The WTA expressed surprise, while tournament officials struggled to fully explain the sudden shift in attendance and atmosphere. In a post-final reflection, one official described the situation as unprecedented, acknowledging that the scale of engagement during Eala's run had been significantly underestimated. What became clear was that the Filipino audience had not simply attended matches, they had followed a narrative. And once that narrative reached its conclusion, their presence naturally receded. The final result would remain in the record books, but the story of the week had already been written elsewhere, in the packed stands, the departing crowds, and the unmistakable realization that a single player's rise had reshaped the entire identity of a tournament. They came to Berlin not simply to watch tennis, they came to watch her. And once Alex Eala was eliminated, many of them felt no reason to remain. The numbers told the story with absolute clarity. The semifinals had sold out within hours of her quarterfinal victory, fueled by overwhelming anticipation and global attention. Yet the final, meant to be the showcase moment of the tournament, struggled to fill even half its seats. Despite aggressive efforts from organizers, including discounted pricing and complimentary tickets for local schools, nothing could recreate the energy that had already faded. The shift was not expressed through protest or disruption, but through absence. It was a quiet, collective withdrawal that spoke louder than any reaction could. Eala herself, watching from the stands after her semi-final defeat, appeared visibly moved by the scenes unfolding around her. She acknowledged privately that her performance had not reached its highest level that day, but the magnitude of support she had received throughout the week left a lasting impression. In a simple and heartfelt message posted afterward, she expressed gratitude to Berlin, describing the experience as deeply meaningful and unforgettable. Across the wider tennis world, the same conversation resurfaced, one that had already begun in tournaments such as the Australian Open, Dubai, and Rome. The realization was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore: the Filipino diaspora does not engage in half measures. When they rally behind a player, they arrive in numbers that can reshape atmosphere, influence attention, and even impact the commercial dynamics of an event. And when that journey ends, their presence recedes just as decisively. The final proceeded regardless. Jessica Pegula lifted the trophy, officially closing the tournament, but the visual contrast was impossible to overlook. Rows of empty seats stood where passionate crowds had once gathered, leaving behind an atmosphere that felt fundamentally changed. For many observers, Berlin was no longer remembered solely for its champion, but for what it revealed about the modern game. Alex Eala had evolved into something larger than a competitor. She had become a cultural force within the sport, and tennis was only beginning to understand the scale of that influence. Her semi-final defeat to Linda Noskova, a powerful 20-year-old Czech player who had previously dominated their matchup at Indian Wells, highlighted the competitive gap on the day. Noskova's explosive serve dictated play from the outset, producing 9 aces and repeatedly forcing short returns that she converted into 33 winners. Eala, visibly affected by physical discomfort, struggled to